hi everyone. Welcome back to another Breaking into Data session. So I'm going to start just talking a little bit about breaking into data, Promotable, who we are, and what we do. And if you guys who are in the chat, just please let me know if you can hear it. Oh, perfect. I can see it now. But just confirm that that's working, and then we'll be good to go. So a few things before we get started. First, introducing, so I'm Aaron Filous, founder of Promotable, host of Breaking into Data, my co-host, Scott Adams, and then also really excited to jump into this conversation with Rachel.
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Always want to get that out of the way, and I should have done that earlier, but that's what it is. Happy to embarrass myself live. Moving on. So what we do, we bring every single week, we have events like this where we bring practitioners who do data work every single day. Right? The whole goal here is for everyone who's either looking to break into data or level up in the data space. Let's talk about what we do, and we're here to help you get there. With that, I'm just gonna quickly share my screen for a second. Got a little short deck to help explain it all, and then let's do present. Here we go. So basically, breaking into data, who are we? We're a community where accomplished data professionals share knowledge and advice to inspire the next generation of data talent. So we do this every single week. Today, we've got Rachel. Next week, we've got someone from LinkedIn. We've got folks from Amex. Really just the goal is to talk about what kinds of roles you have in data, how to break in, what's the difference between data analytics, data science, right, and everything in between. And so, what do we do? Of course, we have our free events. We encourage you to come every week. We encourage you to ask questions. If you have them, feel free to put them in the chat now or as they come up. This is an opportunity to talk to someone who's been there, who wants to mentor and help you. So it's really an opportunity. Next thing, for those of you who want to dive deeper, if you are on the non-technical side, if you're in marketing or product or finance, and you kind of want to go beyond Excel and add data to your toolkit, we have a part-time course. These are 6 weeks, 5 hours a week. It's all live online. It's all taught by practitioners, just like our guest speakers. We teach things like SQL, Tableau, and really just how to apply that to the stuff that you do. It's 5 hours a week in the evening, and of course it's recorded. You get a certificate. It's live instruction, but you can also rewatch it later. For those of you who are interested, feel free to go to our website, promotable.io. Of course, next cohort starts in November. Or feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and we'll happy to chat and tell you a little bit more if it's a good fit for you. And the second thing, this is launching next year at the end of Q1. But really, this is for people who are, you've completed a data science bootcamp or data bootcamp or a master's degree or a PhD, and you're trying to figure out how do you, use these skills that you have and break into data, get that, first data role. So we've put together a package that kind of, gives you all the resources that you might not have had from, your previous training. So of course, in network, our mentors who are all practitioners. It's VPs of data science, data science managers, people who are in data analytics. Ultimately, there are things you can only get from someone who does it every single day. And of course, we have our own in-house technical recruiter. So we like that more than the career coach because they spend all day long pitching companies on people like you. And so you want to understand, how do you make yourself look the best? And last thing is, of course, we connect every single person who's a part of this fellowship with our corporate partners. These are Fortune 1000 companies and high-growth startups who are looking to hire data talent. Of course, this is there's no cost until you actually land a job, and we actually mean that because the way I see it, our success is your success and vice versa. So for those of you who are interested, definitely come and ask, and we'll share more details as that gets ready to go. In the meantime, we can close that off, and we're back. So after that, so Rachel, I know we talked a bit before, but I'm really excited to bring this forward. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into some of your background, bootcamp stuff, and then we'll jump into other people's questions.
Well, hi, thanks for having me. I'm obviously, as you know, I'm a data analyst at Spotify. Besides that, I'm in New York City. I'm Dominican and Cuban, for those that were wondering, and I have a son, so you'll see him walking around. And I actually got into my journey. I got into data analytics by taking boot camps, particularly one sponsored by New York City called NYC Tech Talent Pipeline. So that's sort of like the gist of my path.
Very cool. So I know you did a couple of boot camps. I know most people, at least, maybe I have, no pun intended for data nerds, but maybe sample error. But I think many people will usually do a boot camp. So I'm kind of curious, kind of like how they complement each other, or kind of what like the main benefit of doing each one. Can you kind of talk us through? And I think one thing to call out is, I know there's a few folks that I know who went through the New York City program. So if possible, I'd love also just like a kind of explain like what that is, so that especially if we have anyone in the audience who's from New York, it's probably something that they could consider.
Sure. So my first boot camp was sponsored by the New York City. So basically, from my previous career in tourism, I was laid off, and I decided that I wanted to change careers and focus on tech. And I found this program for unemployed New Yorkers. So the city pays to do workforce development and train people for the talents of tomorrow, right? The high growth industries. So they paid for the training. It was a 40 hours a week, 18-week boot camp on data analytics. But envision that they're taking people with zero tech skills, essentially. Like they know how to use a computer, but no programming, to a data analyst. So a lot of it was basic, right? Just setting the foundation. And it was enough to start. But you don't know what you don't know in the beginning, right? So I was like, oh, I'll take a boot camp. I'll be a data analyst. Great. But then you start realizing all the things that you don't know that you need to learn. And then also the realization comes that if you don't continue learning, you're going to get left behind. So that's when I started looking into, okay, what will complement this program after. So that's when I did more of a data science one. I did 2 data science focused one and a quality assurance one after.
Got it. I'm sorry, I'm just playing with the format here. This is much better. Sorry about that. No, and that's cool. So I think definitely like one difference that I've seen with like programs like yours, where it's really like kind of zero to hero, if you will. I do want to dive into like what you don't know what you don't know, because I think that's really important to call out, both for people who are trying to break in and get their first thing. But the reality is, like, it's something that I say all the time. Like anyone on my team, like I have no idea if I'm doing something wrong. I have no idea if you don't understand something, and I promise I won't bite. I won't yell at you. Just raise your hand and tell me so I know. But I think so many things you jump in and you figure it out. But I think I know for a lot of the boot camps, there's like some sort of test to get into it. So there are some differences, but yeah, no, it's really cool. Tell me a little bit more about, like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, what are the things that you thought kind of going into it? What are the things that, like, afterwards you're like, oh, this is something that's, there's something else I need to pick up, or I have to learn this really fast, or anything like that?
I think I almost replayed the same mindset I had when I went to college at first, that you get a bachelor's, you get a job, everything's great, you get paid really well. And then I was like, okay, I'll take this program, I'll become a data analyst. Great. But then it became like, oh, it's not gonna be like that. Like, they're just sending the foundation, and I definitely had enough foundational skills to work.
Yeah.
But they've also shown me everything that I could learn, that they just don't have the capacity. There's no bandwidth in this program to learn.
I see.
So that was like the first, like, okay, so I just got, like, I'm just scraping the surface on this model. I'm scraping the surface on data analytics. Now what's next? And then now that after they used to say that kick the bird out of the nest, after I was done with that, then it became, okay, what do I need to learn to grow?
One of those, the more you learn, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
I know, it's so crazy.
which is so painful. But it's interesting. So basically you did the first program, which was through the New York City thing. I think it was branded under Galvanized. For those of you who don't know, it's one of the bigger data science boot camps. There's Galvanized, Flatiron, Metis. I think most of them are kind of like, you get what you put in, but you also have to understand what it means to actually do it. It's like a lot of hard work, but as Rachel can attest to, there's lots of other gaps that you need to fill and things that you need to also work on at the same time. I assume that was kind of why you ended up doing the other program as well, kind of fill in some of those things that you realized that, hey, it'd be great to have this, but we don't have time in these 18 weeks or what have you.
Yes, for sure. Like I just needed to know, okay, so we barely didn't touch machine learning at all. So I needed to understand, well, what is the foundation of that?
Yeah.
But even then also like my first program, you only need to know like basic Excel and just like some competence in math. And in comparison, their data science program in the same school, you basically already needed to know a lot of the foundational concepts.
Got it.
So a lot of the boot camps some boot camps are meant for people to start from zero. And the reality is they won't take you to data science, right? They'll take you to like just enough to get you into the industry and data analytics. And that was what that program was. And then now I know that there are programs that take what I learned after the program. So then now you could actually get into a solid data science path.
Yeah, no, there's definitely things where you actually need to have like some sort of background, and part of it's like trying and learning and messing up and coming back. There's a question on here that actually I think we should not good to address even now. You mentioned things that you don't know what you don't know. Is there like, well, obviously this is hard to pick one, but what's the biggest thing that you didn't know? Or just an example. I mean, maybe the biggest one's quite hard.
What I thought originally was that they were going to teach me a set of hard skills that I could just rehash over and over my entire career. And that they told me basically by week 1, I realized that was not the case. I was like, oh, I'm going to learn SQL, I'm going to learn Python, I'm going to learn Tableau, and I'm going to learn everything I need to know in that and move on. But then after you graduate, you start realizing like, oh, I don't even know SQL that well. I don't even know Python that well or Tableau because I just know like enough to get by.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Here's a question to kind of diving into maybe the kind of work you do, but I think part of it, like the difference between someone who's in analytics versus like data science. Kind of talk a little bit more about what like if you can anyway, like the kind of day-to-day or what kinds of stuff that you do as a data analyst.
Sure. So I work obviously for Spotify, and a big model for Spotify is to help the user discover content, and that's what I do. I work on helping the user discover all the content that's in Spotify because there's a lot of in there, right? A user cannot possibly know every single like music track that we have. So we do have to help the user to find out similar artists, similar tracks, similar podcasts that you might be interested in. And I work in-app. So we will do like banners or different like in-app messaging to recommend like, oh, check this out. Why don't you check this out? That aligns with your interests. So it's always just like about discovery, and hopefully you discover an artist that you've never even heard before. That's sort of like the goal, right? To help you discover something that you didn't even know. You didn't even know that artists existed and now you love them.
What are some of the techniques that you use to accomplish that work?
So a lot of it is internal tools.
Okay.
But obviously, once we set a lot of these initiatives, my job is to create the audiences that go in it, and also to analyze how the results are going from these initiatives, and then obviously get better at making those in the future, make better decisions.
How much of your work is just like cleaning bad data? I always ask everyone because it's like a thing we talk about it a lot, right? Bad data in, bad data out. But then I feel like we like forget to talk about that when you're actually like going through programs, because it's like beautiful, clean data sets from Kaggle.
Oh my God, it is. It is wild. It's just so much data. Half the time I don't even know what data set to use. So just like understanding the data that's out there.
Yeah.
And then like it's gotten to the point that we basically have a de facto data engineer within our team who's had to take that responsibility to make sense of the data and transform it into something usable. Because even in a big company, like we're pretty established, like we do take really good care of our processes, but there's always going to be something unexpected.
Oh yeah, no. I at this point, I've asked the same question to so many people, irrespective of like big company, small company, super high tech company versus like old school industrial company, it's like the same thing. It's like no one's perfect, but I'm always curious because like, we always hear things like, oh, 50% of a data person's time is spent like either data wrangling or just understanding. I think I want to point out a point you made of just like understanding what data you have. And it's not like, like, here's this question, now I know I'm just going to look at this one thing and figure it out, right? You have to like, what does that process look like for you? Is it like, here's some stakeholder, they ask you a question, then you have to like architect the entire thing? Like how does like, I don't know if you can like dive into how that process works, but maybe at a super high level.
No, well, we do have a repository where all data sets are, which helps. So we can search for data sets. But even then, I'm still like, one, I've been there only for a few months, and two, there's so much data. So I have to make educated guesses of what tables probably exist. Like there's probably a table with a country name. There's probably a table with X. And then look to see if those tables exist, and then look to see if they have common fields. And there's still like unintended data cleaning, which is like the table's not dirty, but it's in a format that is hard to connect. So you have to like constantly like change the format of each field so that you can actually make connections.
Yeah. Someone had a question about what internal tools are. Obviously, you can't dive into like what exactly your internal tools are, but I think what we can say is like, generally speaking, these are like internally built like SQL editors and like this kind of stuff to allow people to look up, anything in your database. So if you've worked for any sort of big company, you probably had something like that, whether you called it a database or something else. But that's kind of what that is.
Yeah, some of the like tools that people would know that we use a lot is we use BigQuery. And we have to use BigQuery.
How important
and Tableau. We're starting to play with Data Studio, but mostly we do our dashboards in Tableau. And we choose, my team individually does Python for doing a lot of the analyzing, but we're pretty open. Like some people use R, some people use Python, which is becoming more of the status quo, which you could use either.
And are there things that you learned in your bootcamp experience that you use on a daily basis in your job now that really stand out?
Yes. One of the things in terms of the Python side, we focus particularly in pandas and simple visualizations. And that is something that I use basically every day. Pandas is something like super useful. Even it becomes to the point that I just ask someone like, I want to do this function in pandas can melt, but I want to do it in Tableau. Is that a thing? Like it helps you even find it in other tools. So that's something that I use all the time. And then for SQL, even though I learned in Postgres and I'm using BigQuery now, there's the foundational still the same. It's always like I could Google like how to do this thing in BigQuery and find the matching thing to do.
Very cool.
Little things that are different that can throw you off. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that, Scott. You got chopped up for a second there.
Well, that's probably a good thing because my cat was meowing at me, so that didn't come through.
Okay, so you have a cat, I have a dog, and Rachel has a kid. So there's going to be someone. There's going to be someone or something complaining.
There's going to be something.
So yes, everyone has this. We're all real people. I always question someone who doesn't have that, but that's just my soapbox to to share. But we'll dive into some more specific questions, but we're getting the general theme is kind of like your post bootcamp experience. Like what were like the hardest things about like your interview process, things that you maybe didn't realize coming out of your bootcamp that after your first 5 or 10 interviews, you're like, oh man, I have to learn this one thing. I don't know if you can share some insights on that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, it's funny. When I was in my boot camp, I like couldn't wait to finish, and then after you finish, you're like, I want to go back because it's like you're alone. You're kind of like don't know what to do. In terms of my experience, I made a good decision that didn't feel good at the time, but I actually booked my first interview like a month before I graduated. Like I got at some point like, oh, I already know everything I need to know. There's only a few weeks left, and it was a disaster. Just an absolute disaster. So it became like my first reality check like, oh, I don't know what to do. I know the concepts, but I almost didn't know how to put them together, or I didn't know how someone else would verbalize them.
Yeah.
So that was like my first, okay, I need to look at these things in a different context than just my class. So
Yeah.
that's something that I did after. I actually did just happen to do a BigQuery, like little like Coursera course, just because I actually ended up having a BigQuery interview at some point, and it was live in BigQuery. So I think the interviews became almost like reasons to learn new things.
Yeah.
A lot of the take-home exams are essentially like practices, like small little projects.
Yeah, no. Can you talk a little bit more about the take-homes? And I want to call out that point as well, because I think this is not the first time I've heard this. We actually, even last week's speaker said the same thing. It was like, to the extent where like interviews are an opportunity to learn something, right? To like learn something new about what you don't know. And he had recently moved from like a smaller company to like a much larger kind of company with, he went from being a data science manager to now more like an individual contributor, but at like, a huge, I think there's Series B, I don't know, the phrase like 50 million or something like that, right? So it's hard to call yourself a startup at that point when you raise that kind of money. But one of the things I was asking about with that process was, because like, it's one thing when like you've never had a data job and you're trying to get that first one, but then I was like, oh, well, now that you've done that, is it really easy? And he's like, no. It's like it never gets easier. It's like you're learning the whole time. He's like, there's all these things I knew, but then I got into this next interview and it was like a total disaster. And then I was like, oh, I need to fix that. So I appreciate that. But yeah, so going to like that interview process, were like the most challenging parts the take home, or is that easy? What was like, it was like a standard process for you? Was it kind of just like phone screen, take home, and then some sort of on-site? Or yes, probably on-site, but
I went through a few interviews. Funny enough, I realized quickly then the take homes actually weren't the challenge themselves. They were challenging, but they were more like time consuming, because if you did a boot camp and have some foundational skill, you should at least, like, the one skill you probably learn is how to Google what you need. So a lot of these take home exams is like, well, I know I need to do something that does X, find it. So you kind of, I was able to figure them out. The challenge with those became the questions themselves. The questions themselves could be like, here's a data set, tell me something interesting. Or here's a data set, and here's some really vague question that makes no sense and will give you no context. So I would spend like 80% of the time just trying to like get into the mindset of the interview. Like, what are they trying to get? So it became like, that was more challenging. The take homes, the technical ones were like more straightforward, but the take homes that had to do with like like more of the analytics side, like find out some insights, answer this question, those were much harder and time consuming. I got better at those as time went by. What was harder to get used to was the actually verbalizing what you did, what you could do, applying the concepts, because you just haven't done it. And I didn't realize now, but I probably had like, I don't know if I love the imposter syndrome concept, but it's also like, you feel like you're lying. Like, you feel like I'm clearly making this up. Like, I've never done this.
I don't know. I mean, Scott also has his fair share of interviews. I don't know if you have anything else to tag along, but I remember, Scott, last other week, you made a similar point about like verbalizing the stuff that you're doing so that they kind of can follow along with your work. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to tag along on that point.
Yeah, it's a cliche that if you can teach something, you really know it, or more generally, when you can explain something, you really know it. But I think that's a great point that you make, that is a really hard part. And you think all about the hard skills and the actually coding, but looking back and being able to articulate the choices you made and why you made them in comparison to other alternatives that are available is a really tough task and something to be mindful of in the interview process. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
So, of course, the standard question of like, what was your journey like to kind of break into, finally break into data and land at a cool company like Spotify? But I think that maybe the better question that they might also be asking is like, were you like, hey, I really want to work for this company, and you kind of figured it out, or is it like you did 25 interviews and kind of like step by step, you kind of managed that opportunity, but it wasn't like you didn't start day one saying I want this?
If I'm being honest,
Yeah.
I did this bootcamp when I was 30, I believe. So now I'm 32. I felt that I was sort of like late to the game.
Oh,
and then I needed to push and trying to get my feet wet as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So then I knew that I needed to be in like a big enough company that had like a lot of data processes going on, a lot of methods, so that I could learn from. So my first data analyst job, I was essentially like the only data analyst there. And I was able to do the job, but I didn't have anybody to learn from. So I knew like from week one that it wasn't going to last, because I'm like, I need the next thing is going to be a company that has a data structure.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. It's like, I think we've talked about in previous events, like the difference between working at a smaller company versus a large company. I definitely feel your pain. I've been in those kinds of roles where you feel like you're like making it up as you go along. You're doing it, but you're like, when you want to ask a question, there's no one that you can ask that question to except for Google. For those of you who haven't checked out, let me Google that for you. It is when someone asks you a question that they should be Googling instead of asking you, you send them this thing, it sends them the link, goes to Google, and it Googles it for them. It's kind of funny. I wouldn't recommend doing it to your boss, but it's definitely my brand of humor. But I think that's really relevant though, right? Trying to figure out, okay, let's go to a company that has like big established processes. So so I'm sure you were targeting kind of like Fortune 1000 or like really high growth startups, or I guess Spotify's public at this point. So
companies that had a data team.
Yeah.
And you could tell, right? Just by looking at the job titles, that they have a data scientist and a data engineer. Are they publishing research work? Like you kind of got a sense for that. Obviously, a lot of them became like more well-known companies, or companies that were in a space that would require you to be utilizing data. Yeah.
Here's a question. What on your team, is it mostly people that have like really strong like quantitative like degrees, like PhD type things, or is it a lot of people who also came out of boot camps, or like a non-traditional way of breaking in?
It is a massive company, so there's everything.
Oh yeah, no. Obviously, you can't speak for everyone, but if there is like looking at your team, for example, is it kind of like, is there a good mix, or like you the only bootcamp person? And if you can't share, it's okay as well.
I'm coming from a relatively small team, so I believe I might be the only person that like their foundational knowledge was bootcamp. I think you find a lot in which the foundational knowledge is related, even though it's not data science. Like we have someone who studies stats, and they feel like they don't use most of what they learn, but it is like a foundational topic. Or you have some people that went through the marketing team, and now they're working in insights, right? So the marketing context was foundational for the data work that they're doing. So ideally, and I think that works outside of Spotify. Like it doesn't matter as much that you don't have a computer science or a data science background, as much as whatever you did before either connects, or in my case, you almost like make it connect. I feel like I almost like re-examine my past 10 years of a career from the lens of like all the times I was using data and what I did with it. And then like in my mind, I was like, I've really been a data analyst for 10 years.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here. I always tell people, I'm like, it doesn't matter what you do data. You might not think you do data, but you're thinking, even if you're like running a small business, it's like, I need to buy like this many pounds of this, or I need to get like this margin, or like whatever. It's like, you're not sitting there, you're not writing SQL queries to figure it out, but data doesn't have to be huge data, right? It could just be like, at the end of the day, like the most important thing is the question part versus all the cool technologies. Well, we kind of just talked about that. I'm just going through some of these questions. Someone just asked about your kind of like what that process was like. Kind of, most of these companies are like, hey, entry level role, but you still have to have like 2+ years of experience. But I think it's, feel free. I mean, I'd love your take, but I think you kind of started talking about how you had to like tie that together with like, hey, I've got this experience. I've been doing data. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, like for context, I used to work in the tourism sector, and it was on the sales side. So I used to go to trade shows to talk to teachers to bring their students to the attractions I represented, or I would work with resellers who would sell like Expedia to put our attractions in their website to bring their customers, or even go to other countries to convince people to come to New York City. So that was my job for 10 years. And that's like the most of the job, or what people associate the job most with. But to do that well, you need to have a good operations, because it becomes like you have to scale a lot of contracts. You have to scale like people going in through the door, scale billing. And that was the part that I liked. So I was usually a team of a whole bunch of sales managers, and the only one who would say like, let's like collect all of our accounts and see which ones are doing well or not.
Yeah.
And nobody volunteers for that,
Yeah, let's understand like what our cost of acquisition is. How long does it take someone to do this and that? I'm also an operations guy, so I think we're more similar than different at this point. But because I think that's the most. I mean, once you have a good business, like that's the next most important part. Someone was asking like, I'm not sure if you can share this, but like, how complex do your queries get? For like, is it mostly kind of just like you look at some of the stuff that you have and you're like, this is like a linear regression problem. I could do it in Excel if I wanted to, or are you mostly doing like, I don't know, ridiculously large queries?
So it's not about how complex it is. They get complex within reason, because it's usually about aggregating different data sets together. What becomes complex that I'm still learning, it's because it's so much data. I'm still learning on how to optimize it so I don't incur as much costs. And that becomes like an even bigger challenge, because you're like, it looks simple enough. And then my coworker's like, oh my God, you can't do that. That would be crazy. I'm like, I don't know what to do. It seems like this is the simplest way. So sometimes you have to make the query be more complex so it ends up actually incurring less cost, or it's less complex for a big query.
Yeah, it's interesting that I've heard some like the bigger like FANG companies, all the big tech companies will say like, we have a compute budget, and we can only like run so many things, and we have to like show the ROI from like this model we ran or something like that, based on like the amount of like server space we used and their data center in Nevada or whatever they put it.
I have never heard that conversation internally, but I know that those tools exist. Like I could go in and check the cost of my own queries. So I'm like, it's public data. It's just I don't want people to see this.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool, just as like a side note, but that's just because I'm a big nerd. But it'd be nice to say like, oh yeah, I solved this problem, and by the way, I did it with I used way fewer resources than we used than like the average. Yeah,
that's the goal, or the goal becomes like trying to search to see if somebody else already has a table that gets you like halfway there. And then like be smart enough to like find that and use that table instead.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely a big fan of work smarter, not harder. But I and that sounds like you're trying to cheat, but the reality is like I think you mentioned this point 15 minutes ago when you said something along the lines of like, okay, well, first I don't even know all the data that's there, right? First, it's like let's figure out which tables we have. Let's understand what basics of like how this could potentially work, kind of think that through. And I think that works all the way around. But going back to kind of like that, like navigating the post bootcamp, what's next? I love that you started doing interviews early, because you learn very quickly. I mean, I remember my first interview, it was atrocious, so embarrassing. I'm not going to talk about it, but it was like
they asked me what was p-value, and it was just so embarrassing what I said. I can't even get started.
I think we all have all been there.
Yeah, no, they're all, no pun intended, but they're all data points, right? All the things that you learn. But one of the questions was like, how long did it take after you finished to like find a job you liked? But I think I'll add to that, which is like, how long did it take you to start getting comfortable in your interviews? Because I think that's like how you get to like whether you get the perfect job you like. I mean, no one gets the first perfect job, right? It's kind of like, this works, now I know what I like, now I can figure it out. But I think if there's a point where you're like, oh, this is not as hard as it was earlier, or now I'm comfortable talking about p-values, you know?
I think it took me, let's say, probably at least a month, if not two, to just start getting my narrative pre-bootcamp better and connecting to what I was doing. But the first, like, even the applying, not even actually interviewing, I kept like slacking my professor, like, can I do data cleaning? Can I do data transformation? I didn't even know what like the basic terms meant. So also like I didn't even know what to apply for in the beginning. So it took me at least, I would say, like 1 to 2 months just to feel comfortable with like getting to some of like the situational questions, which I think would catch me more off guard. And then within, I would say after I did like 3 or 4, like some of the take-home tech assessments, then I got the gist of like, okay, I get what these are doing. So it was more about like quantity of them. Like, okay, after a few of those, you get what they're doing. After like my first like couple of case study ones, then I was like, okay, I have a better handle of what they're looking for. But I have like a whole folder of them. You need to, and you should like just apply and just get as many. Like I remember one that was like, we're calling you because we think you're a good candidate, but also the truth is we offered it to someone, but they haven't accepted it. So you're kind of like our backup option, like to see if it will work out if they don't accept. And I was like, that's fine. I'll take the assessment.
Yeah, no, I mean, take all the assessments you can get, right? All the questions. So what about, are there other, because that's actually a really good point, right? Take a record of like all the interviews you do, all the take homes. Are there any other like little things like that kind of can help you kind of, or help folks in the audience kind of not take the next step, but kind of, have more of a strategy to the interview process and that sort of thing?
I think you have to learn. So my bootcamp had like a lot of classes on how to manage your career, your job search process, and a lot of it had to do with networking, right? Like making these relationships. But that's something that's like gave me a lot of anxiety because like I didn't know how to sound authentic. I felt like I was intrusive. Now in retrospect, now I realize like it's not a big deal. Like I love when people reach out to me cold, like it's fine. But back then it felt uncomfortable. So I would actually like not apply to things holding for that. And it took me a while to then realize like my anxiety over that is preventing me from applying. And if I don't apply, I'm clearly not gonna get jobs. So then it became like a volume. Like I changed my strategy to more like a volume strategy, but volume in terms of like, I'm going to apply to every job I find interesting. And if I get it, great. If I don't get it, great. If I get moved to a stage at all, then I feel like I validated that I did something right in the application enough to get interest. So then I kind of had to change my strategy to match what my strengths were, because I felt like I was better at the technical side once I had the interview. Than at this like chit-chatting, warming people up part.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think part of it is just learning. I mean, from one introvert to another, I would say that I definitely understand like the fear of like not wanting to put yourself out there because you're afraid of like, I'm going to be embarrassed or do something stupid. I mean, I did like 5 stupid things just during this last 40 minutes. So I've learned to just kind of let it go. But, it's one of those things where I totally get it. I love that you pointed that out, because it's like, it's very easy to say, very hard to do. But one question here just came up is
and on the side note, like I had 0 connection in Spotify. Like it was just cold apply.
That's really cool. Speaking of connections, I want to talk a little bit about networking. I know everyone has their way of doing it. Is there like, did you, aside from just cold applying, did you like set up like informational interviews with people, or just like talk to people, or obviously like, you probably learned more about that as you kind of got into your interview process, but I'd love just some insight for the folks here who are trying to figure out how to go about that process.
I did two things. As mentioned, like the cold reaching out was not super comfortable, but I was going to a lot of events, and I used to like try to make sure I connected with every person I interviewed. Remember, I went through an interview that I had for one job, I had 12 people I interviewed with. Like in my mind, those were 12 connections.
Yeah.
And then the reason why I will go to events and want to nurture the connection wasn't, part of it was almost selfish. Like I wanted to just hear them talk about data to know how I should be talking about data, hear the questions they would ask, so I would understand like the mindset of people that are in that field.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like it's hard to talk data and come off authentic in the beginning. It feels like, oh, I meant to say this, and I meant to say, like, for example, in Pandas, I meant to say method and I use function, and like you start mixing up little things that so that like I just needed to go to these events to hear people, and that would help my comfort level. And then like, you're both waiting in the bathroom and it becomes like more casual conversation and less forced.
Yeah, no, I mean, or sometimes it does get forced. I always think of this time I went to I used to go quite a few of these back when we could do in-person things, and I connected with like VPs of like really big companies. Like one, I was like a marketing automation company, and it was like we were both like awkwardly avoiding talking to anyone, and we're like, we were both trying to grab the same brownie or something, like. And it sounds so stupid, but then it was like, okay, you awkwardly like shake hands, and if you can move past that, at least we did. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it's as little things like that just putting yourself out there, and like not trying to ask for a job.
Yeah, because obviously if I found you on LinkedIn, like I have some information about you. I know what company you work with. I have an interest in the company most likely. Yeah. But in those events, it's kind of like, why are you here? Why are you here?
Why are you here? Like, because the beer is free, like what? But for real, that's oftentimes what it gets. What about for like practicing like assessments? Is there like any way that you did, aside from just like going to your interviews, messing them up, and then fixing that on the back end? Are there any like resources that you use to like practice beforehand?
Besides, no. I was supposed to say that. But what I did do is I just happened to be a TA for the next cohort of students. So then within the next few months, not only I had like the people that I graduated with and now the students, every person that told me they wanted an interview, I asked for their take. I asked to like either see their take-home assignment if I could. Some people will be like, I share it, but I can't send it to you. Yeah. Or like them to describe to me what I did. So I kept like having like this, I kept trying to find out as much as I could about the possible things I could encounter in a take-home exam or during the interview process.
Really, so, like, really smart.
So listen to like every person that is around you, just be like, every time you see an interview, let me know how it was. If you have a Slack channel, like post your interview experiences so we know not to commit the same mistake.
Oh yeah, no one wants to do the same stupid stuff.
Or the thing that caught you off guard that you like didn't even know people asked.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, I've done my fair share of like absolutely dumb things, but folks who are watching, we've got time for a couple more questions. Feel free to throw them in when you get a chance. But yeah, one thing, I mean, I think definitely being a TA, if you can, I think is super valuable, both from like the network perspective and also like for me, I think it's kind of similar to like when I had my first manager job, if you will, and I started doing interviews and I started learning, oh, those are the things I say. They sound so stupid. And so you like learn how to like not do it again.
Yeah, being a TA is helpful, and also like sometimes if you don't have the time commitment or you there's probably lesser ways to get involved. Like, okay, maybe you can't be a TA, but maybe you could be a mentor in the project if you can, or a mentor, or even informally a mentor. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Any other? I guess kind of final parting. Oh, here we go. One more question. Oh, what was your process like for getting cold interviews? I assume it's more luck than anything else, but if you're
Talent.
obviously talent.
I just started. Every time I saw a job that I really wanted, rather than like what I was doing before, like save it for later when I have more time to like work really hard on the cover letter. I had like bare to the bones cover letter that somebody actually gave me this advice. Sorry if it's not the same as Promotable, but like I had like this cover letter that was pretty small, and they said like just the first 2 sentences should be like a wow statement, something that catches the person's attention as to why you want to work here, and then the rest can be like pretty straightforward. So like catch your attention with the cover letter, and the rest, it's okay if it's generic. So I had that format. So I was like, okay, I just need to work on these 2 sentences and submit the application. So I just submitted it, and I got a call. But I realized that over time, also like I graduated in January 2020. So like maybe it was because the pandemic was like becoming more status quo. But then it became like cold applications that got good response with them. Obviously not easy applies, but cold applications, obviously working on your resume. Like I have a lot of keywords and things that are part of the job because I was doing more smaller courses. So I was adding, by nature of that, a lot of like more technology that I was learning.
Yeah, and being able to like show it. Like I think that people always ask questions about projects, and that's always like, as long as it's not the most generic one, as long as it's not your Titanic data set, we're happy. But you pointed out this short cover letter. I agree. I hate reading cover letters. When I see it like 3 or 4 lines, and that's all I'm going to read. And that's why I tell people the same thing. It's the same way when I reach out to people, how I reached out to you, right? It's like 4 lines. Here's what I am. Here's what I want. Here's why it matters to you. That's it. And then if your resume sucks, then
just enough to get the person to read your resume, or vice versa.
Exactly. It's like that's like half the battle is just like, it's like, did this person do basic amount of like reading to understand like what we do and like why they're a fit, like why they care. It could just be like, hey, like I really like this industry. I'm like a total nerd, and I love this. I love what you're doing. Cool mission. Like here's how I think I can help. It's like sometimes as easy as that. In terms of like I'll try and grab 2 of these questions here. In terms of, you mentioned you did lots of small courses. Were there any like certifications that you recommend? Like is it important to become like a Tableau wizard or whatever they call it, or like anything else that's like super important that like matters for a resume, or is it just like stuff that's like helpful for you to learn, but like the person interviewing you doesn't really care if you have like the Tableau badge?
Oh, I did a LinkedIn course in Tableau, so I had like an essential LinkedIn certification. So it was in my resume, but I absolutely hate it. Like I really don't like doing it at all. But in retrospect, like I see it now that it's one of like the most valuable skills on the data analyst level. I guess particularly because a lot of data scientists don't have that skill set, right? And like it's almost like we have all this data, but we can't see the content of it. So like my team is becoming really big on like creating dashboards. So I wish in retrospect that I would have spent the time to become certified in Tableau. I think it would have been like a game changer, not necessarily for my resume because I had a certification, but it was more like for my own comfort level. Now I'm sort of like learning on the go, while I wish I would have been like, okay, this is really valuable. Let me really understand it.
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll end with this last question. I'll answer it with my opinion, and then would love for you to jump in. But someone just asked, in particular for Spotify, for like projects, like what kinds of things you recommend, if they recommend like doing some sort of like recommendation engine or something like that. I would say like, we understand like the kind of business that they do. Like if it's doing lots of optimizing, if you want to work at an airline, all they do is optimize, right? They're trying to figure out like how many people can they put on that plane with like maximum revenue. With Spotify, it's like, hey, we want to make sure that we direct you to find these new artists or like other kinds of stuff. So it's like, generally speaking, you want to have probably a couple of different projects specific to different industries. That's my personal opinion. I will definitely underscore that as definitely not like canon or like what you have to do by any means. But I'm not sure how it worked for you, or like if you've been on interviews now, like when you're looking at other people's projects. Like I think we'll end with your thoughts on this.
So I would say that I've had a few people in LinkedIn send me this message, and I will always say, do not do a project for Spotify. Like that should be like you should not do that. Do a project that like you feel is going to help you for like the types of jobs that you're applying. Because what if the Spotify, like I hate the disappointment of you spend 20 hours for this project in Spotify just to not get the Spotify job and then feel like, well, I've made it so custom to them.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So so that's one. I would say that I had a lot in GitHub, a lot of smaller projects, but most of them were from school. I don't think I had like this like major marquee project that they looked at. Like I think they just made the comment, my boss, I see that you're very active in GitHub and that you have like a lot of them have Python. So like it was just like enough to get a sense that I knew how to use Python enough to put projects together. Yeah. But it's because in my particular interview, they have first a tech assessment and then a take-home assessment that is a case. And the 2 data analyst jobs that I got were both have the same component, which is here's some data and then give me some insights. I've had many of them, but like these in two in particular, or here's a question. And what I realized in those, that if you take really good care of those, it's almost like your past projects are not as important as this one project that I am doing for you as part of this interview. Yeah. So I literally spent hours just reading the Spotify annual reports to get in the mindset of like what was important for Spotify. As a public company, they have to tell you what metrics they value. They have to tell you the direction of the company in the annual report. So I just looked through that as to like get context as if I was working there. And then when I did my case study, then one of the things that they really liked was that I was using almost like subconsciously the same metrics that they use, the same wording that they use, because I had been studying as if I worked there. Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. Super insightful. Actually, you are the first person to have ever said that they, at least for me, that as long as I've been doing this, that actually went through a company's annual report. I didn't read the entire thing, Like, no, but I mean, it's smart, right? You go through, you understand like the kinds of like jargon that they use. You understand like what they're telling investors. Hey, this is where this business is trying to go. Because ultimately, like, look, we all like, the only reason the company is able to pay the bills is because they have this business, right? Like, it is what it is. But understanding that, like, have that domain knowledge, if you will, like. I think it's really valuable. I think it helps, and I think for you it helped. And yeah, I mean, like if you can speak the company's language, that's like half the battle, because at least they get why you're doing it, and also, to be honest, it shows that you did the work. Like it shows that you actually did that, and that's like half the battle. Is like you weren't told to, you understood how to do it, right? All those things, all those intangibles that like you can't. I guess you can't teach them, but like, it's one of those things. If you know someone does that and has the initiative, then they can teach you better SQL, right? It's like that's half the battle. Okay, that's all the time we have for questions, guys. But really great questions. Definitely happy everyone showed up, and definitely we have a few more almost every week. We'll hopefully see everyone next time, and then yeah. See you guys next time.
Bye.
All right.